Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into what is honestly one of the most intense pieces of historical correspondence ever written. We usually picture military history as like massive troop movements, complicated supply lines, or brilliant battlefield tactics. But sometimes the absolute most devastating weapon you can deploy in a conflict isn't a sword, and it definitely isn't a siege engine. It's literally just a piece of parchment. So grab a seat, because today we are analyzing an absolute masterclass in psychological warfare.
All right, so let's kick things off with a pretty fascinating question. What exact words do you use to completely dismantle an enemy's psyche before a battle even begins? Put yourself in the shoes of a military commander for a second. How do you project such absolute, terrifying confidence that the person reading your letter feels their entire empire crumbling around them just by looking at ink on a page? Well, it doesn't happen by accident, that's for sure. It requires a very, very specific architecture of language.
Section 1. A message to the king. Psychological warfare.
So, our primary text today was written by the legendary military commander Khalid bin al-Walid, and it's addressed directly to the king of the Persians. I want you to just take a second and really absorb the raw power of this text. It's actually remarkably short, only about 65 words in its original Arabic, but man, it carries the weight of a whole army. It reads, "As for what follows, praise be to God who dissolved your system, weakened your plot, divided your word, weakened your might, stripped your wealth, and removed your glory. So when my letter reaches you, submit and be safe, or pledge the dima and pay the jizya. And if not, by God, other than whom there is no deity, I will march upon you with a people who love death as you love life, and who desire the hereafter as you desire this world." Okay, wow. It is relentless, it is heavily structured, and it's frankly terrifyingly precise. This isn't a negotiation. It's definitely not some polite diplomatic exchange between peers. No, this is a literal verbal siege.
Moving on to Section 2, Dismantling the Psyche and Breaking the Enemy.
Let's look at how this letter builds its psychological dominance right from the very first syllable. Because trust me, the structure here, it's no accident. It's meticulously designed to systematically break down the reader's reality. Think about it. It doesn't even start with a greeting. There's no "to His Royal Majesty" or, greetings from your neighbor. It totally bypasses standard diplomacy and just hits the reader with a devastating 6-point list of their current failures. It covers the whole shebang: political stability, strategy, internal unity, military strength, the economy, and legacy. And the crucial part here? All of this is attributed to a higher power. The author isn't boasting, saying, "I did this to you." He's saying, "The divine has already decreed your ruin."
And you've really got to notice the specific verbs he chooses here. Dissolved, weakened, divided, stripped, removed. These aren't just words of defeat, right? They're words of unraveling. Dissolve implies a foundation just melting away. Divide highlights this deep internal fracture. Strip gives the feeling of being forcefully left bare. It masterfully creates this narrative that a total systematic collapse of the empire's foundation is already underway. Basically, the king is sitting there reading a eulogy for his own reign.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 3 ultimatums, inescapable choices.
All right, so once that mental foundation is fully cracked and the reader has been forced to really internalize this staggering list of vulnerabilities, the letter just pivots so sharply into its structural core. The key phrase here is, "So when my letter reaches you." This simple little phrase is actually a massive shift in the text. It snaps the reader right out of that past tense recounting of divine defeat and violently yanks them into immediate, unyielding action in the present. It's the signal. The psychological breakdown is over and the clinical, inescapable choices have begun. The clock has officially started ticking.
The author then lays out 3 incredibly stark, narrowing choices for the king. It's like this perfect funnel of inevitability. Step 1, submit, embrace Islam, and find safety. That's the path of least resistance. Step 2, if you refuse that, you have to agree to a protection pact known as the dima and pay a tax, the jizya. Basically, you keep your beliefs but you acknowledge our dominance. And then, step 3, if you reject both diplomacy and subjugation, well, there's only one option left on the table: absolute war. There's zero room for counteroffers here, absolutely no room for negotiation.
Now, if those first 2 diplomatic off-ramps are rejected, the text locks in that third option with an incredibly heavy absolute oath. And if not, by God other than whom there is no deity, I will march upon you. This completely removes the commander's personal agency. It frames the coming march not as a choice, but as an unstoppable, divinely sanctioned certainty. It's not just a threat, It's framed as an ironclad promise sworn on the highest possible authority.
And that leads into Section 4, Life and Death. The final juxtaposition.
So this brings us to the final act. Having laid out the utter ruin of the king's empire and presented this claustrophobic set of choices, we hit the legendary closing line.
And this is an absolute masterclass in rhetorical juxtaposition. On one hand, you've got the advancing army described as a force whose greatest desire is death and the hereafter. On the other hand, the enemy is characterized as desperately clinging to life and this physical world. This isn't just about comparing military strength, not at all. It is comparing core human motivations. Think about it. How do you fight an army that actively seeks out the very worst outcome you could possibly inflict upon them? If your ultimate punishment is death, but your enemy's ultimate reward is also death, well, your tactical leverage drops to absolutely zero.
Section 5. The anatomy of a threat. Total mastery.
As we pull all these pieces together, we can really start to see the full anatomy of this threat. It starts by completely isolating the enemy from their confidence. It moves right through those unavoidable ultimatums. And then, by ending on this chilling note, it upends the very nature of warfare. It strips away any conventional military advantage. Honestly, it doesn't matter how many horses, archers, or thick walls the king has. The author is weaponizing the very concept of mortality against him. He is essentially saying, your love for this world makes you weak, and our detachment from it makes us invincible. It takes the most basic human instinct for survival and turns it into a glaring tactical vulnerability.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound final thought to ponder today. When we look at this brief 65-word document, we really have to ask ourselves, does the true power of a military threat lie in the physical size of its army or in its total mastery of the enemy's psyche? Because when you can break down an opponent's world, their stability, their choices, and their very will to live so completely on just a single piece of parchment, is the physical battle already won? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating historical explainer with me. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and always keep looking for the deeper strategies hidden in plain text.